Part 107. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1061. Chapter 1061, Teach them a lesson. Sure enough, the girl said, "My name is Xiaoling." Principal Xia became even more pleasant, "So you are Xiaoling." Several examiners reported to me the results of this selection and they all praised you. It is a great honor for our training camp to recruit you. In his heart, he wiped out a cold sweat. This girl is really Xiaoling. As expected of a man of great background, he has such a flamboyant temper and is not afraid of offending anyone at all. In just half a day, he has caused so many troubles. Yesterday, he received a call. Secretary Zhou said that Xiaoling would come to the principal's office to see him today. He put down all his matters early in the morning and concentrated on sitting in the office waiting for her. He originally wanted to send someone to pick her up at the school gate. But Secretary Zhou said that the little girl didn't like being too high profile, so Principal Xia gave up. And wait, finally, there was a call from the gate saying that she had entered the school gate. However, 20 minutes passed and she still did not appear in the principal's office. Principal Xia is worried that nothing will happen to her, right? I searched all the way along the corridor, but luckily I caught up, otherwise it would have been really unimaginable. Principal Xia broke out in a cold sweat, secretly calling Amitabha in his heart, and said to Xiaoling diligently, "Because of the mistakes in the training camp some time ago, I asked you to. I've been wronged a lot and I'm really sorry." Everyone was shocked, right? Principal Xia actually apologized to Xiaoling? Is this the sun coming out in the west? Xiaoling snorted softly, "This is not something that can be done with just an apology." Principal Xia said, yes, I will definitely give you a satisfactory explanation." Li Bingman was also very surprised. When did Principal Xia become so polite to an unknown person? Is it just because she can sing dolphin sounds? But how can this compare to my own diva background? Principal Xia should be able to decide which one is more important and which one is less important. Could it be that Principal Xia didn't know about the conflict between her and Xiaoling? Li Bingman was confused. But those classmates had already told him just now. Principal Xia, she had to say, Xiaoling went too far. She was absent from class for so long without any reason, and she wanted to take my position as monitor as soon as she got there. Although I don't care about this position, but if you ask, with so many people in the class, who will obey her? She is being unreasonable. Bingman, don't be too fussy about your life, Principal Xia, adhering to his usual smiling tiger style, taught Li Bingman earnestly. Although his words were soft, his words were sharp. The monitor should have been the chief of the school year. Some time ago, it was Xiaoling who asked for leave, so I asked you to take over temporarily. Now that she is back, it is only fair that you return her position. I will ask the Academic Affairs Office to change the class committee list for this term. This, Li Bingman was shocked, no. She finally became the squad leader. If she was removed from the position, it would be more humiliating than if she had never been the monitor in the first place. She doesn't want to be so embarrassed. Principal Xia, my sister is Li Binjiao, she reminded Principal Xia anxiously. Principal Xia frowned secretly. This ignorant girl actually threatened him with her sister? Even if her sister is Li Binjiao, Xiaoling's backer is still Pei Xian. Look at Xiaoling. She has such an amazing background but she has always kept silent. But what about Li Bingman? I wish I could spread it to the whole world. It's really a full bucket without shaking half a bucket. The more ignorant you are, the more arrogant you are. Principal Xia's face darkened, so what if your sister is Li Binjiao? In the Emperor training camp, everything depends on strength. Since you lost to Xiaoling in the trial, don't make excuses to grab things that don't belong to you. Li Bingman was stunned. Principal Sha didn't have this attitude when her sister asked Principal Sha to take care of her. In the end, what happened? However, it was not easy for her to question Principal Sha. Although her sister was a diva-level star, Principal Sha's position in charge of the training camp was also very stable, and she was not much lower than her sister. Even my sister must be polite when she sees him. Otherwise, if he says something bad to the media will immediately say, Lee Binjayu doesn't respect teachers, Lee Binjayu used to I didn't do well in the training camp test, etc. It's too easy to spread negative news. Li Bingman had no choice but to swallow this bitter water by herself. Xiaoling was very satisfied with Principal Sha's handling and said proudly, "Huh, Li Bingman, you really think you are the monitor, and you don't even look in the mirror. Are you worthy? You are just a thief, shameless." She scolded her heartily, and Li Bingman's face became uglier every time she cursed. The discipline committee member couldn't stand it anymore. "Xiaoling, why are you talking? You." Although Li Bingman is in trouble now, he still wants to protect her. After all, the Queen's sister is there. Even if she is not the squad leader, I will rely on her for opportunities in the future. Also, the discipline committee member made a good plan. It is easy to add icing on the cake, but difficult to provide help when the time is right. Now is a good time to help Li Bingman when the time is right. As long as he tries his best to protect her, she will definitely be moved. If you can commit yourself to me. The more he thought about it, the more wonderful it became. Unexpectedly, reality immediately poured a bucket of cold water on him. Principal Sha looked at Xiaoling with a smile. "Xiaoling, you are the class president now and can appoint your own class committee. The people Li Bingman appointed before will not count. You can remove them all." This sentence is exactly what Xiaoling wants. She had long disliked the disciplinary committee member, Li Bingman's lackey. She sneered and looked at the discipline committee member. "You have been dismissed. Aren't you going to punish me to run 100 laps on the playground? Very good, you can run 100 laps for me now. I won't be allowed to run until I finish. Sleep and eat during class." Xiaoling felt extremely relieved to treat the other person's body in his own way. The disciplinary committee member's expression changed. 100 laps. The playground at the training camp is very large, and the track is very long. I can't even finish 100 laps until dark. Generally speaking, the penalty for training camp is 50 laps. He just asked Xiaoling to run 100 laps just because he wanted to make her look bad. He didn't expect the punishment to come so quickly. "What?" Not satisfied, Xiaoling smiled and said, "Then 300 laps will be enough." "What, 300 laps?" the discipline committee member exploded. "Don't go too far, Xiaoling. Is it great to be the squad leader? No one can finish 300 laps. Principal, I want to complain about her abusing her power. I refuse." This poor disciplinary committee member still hasn't seen the situation clearly. Principal Sha smiled very kindly. "Little students, don't get excited. 300 laps has indeed exceeded the limit of human physical ability. The school will not let you lose your life." That's it. When the discipline committee member heard what Principal Sha said, he immediately felt confident. Xiaoling is abusing her power. I demand that she be removed from her position. Let Li Bingman be the monitor again. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1062. Chapter 1062 Xiaoling's Counterattack. Xiaoling sneered, "You are dreaming." The discipline committee member refused to give in. "What qualifications do you have to be the monitor? Don't overestimate your abilities." Xiaoling still sneered, "I don't know if I'm overestimating my abilities, but you're about to run around." The atmosphere was tense, and Principal Sha smoothed things over with a smile. "Don't make any noise, don't make any noise, It's just 300 laps, isn't it? It's not good to hurt the harmony among classmates over such a trivial matter. Xiaoling, you also give in, these 300 laps running in one breath will kill someone, and you don't want to make things worse, right? Do you think it's okay to let him run 100 laps first, rest for 3 days, and then run 100 laps, 300 laps in 3 runs? In this way, he will be punished without causing any loss of life. Everyone was stunned. This principal Xia really killed without blood? Smiling Tiger is indeed a smiling tiger. They originally thought he was helping the disciplinary committee, but who knew he was on Xiaoling's side? Even if 300 laps are divided into 3 runs, the interval between each time is only a few days. For ordinary people, the skin will have to peel off even if they are not dead. It is foreseeable that for at least half a month in the future, Li Hua, the discipline committee member, will be useless. He will repeat the cycle of running, recuperation every day. The courses at the training camp are very tight. If he misses half a month of classes, it will be difficult to keep up with the progress in the future. More seriously, it will affect test scores and debut. Discipline committee member Li Hua looked ugly. Principal, you can't do this. Principal Xia was still smiling. I'm just giving Xiaoling a suggestion. How to implement it depends on her idea. You know, it's not easy for the school to get involved in this kind of thing. Everyone is spitting out blood. It's so obvious that the gang is being ganged up on. Why don't you just intervene? But they forgot that when the teachers favored Li Bingman and excluded Xiaoling, they all took it for granted. Xiaoling readily accepted Principal Xia's opinion. Okay, since I've given him rest time, let's add more and run 400 laps. If he exercises more, he won't have time to talk. What? Everyone was in an uproar again. 300 laps was already incredible, but she actually asked people to run 400 laps. Is there a mistake? The person speaking this time was Li Bingman. Her lackey was bullied into this. If she didn't come forward to defend her, she might lose her support in the future. I don't agree with this. It doesn't matter whether I agree with you or not, Xiaoling said lightly, squinting her eyes and looking at her. Li Bingman, do you still think you are the monitor? It's time to settle the accounts between us. You go run with him first, just 400 laps. You dare? Li Bingman couldn't believe it. Why did this girl use chicken feathers as arrows? Do you think being a monitor is great? She dares to offend the queen's sister. What am I afraid of? Xiaoling looked like she was watching her show. You and your lackeys should run around for me. This dog's problem of looking down on others should have been cured long ago. Running in circles? Everyone looked at each other in horror. No, right? Then Xiaoling shouted, Xiahua, come to my side. In the crowd, a quiet girl stood carefully next to Xiaoling. She was Xiahua, the friend Xiaoling met when she reported to the training camp on her first day. Originally, she was extremely worried when she saw that Xiaoling had another dispute with Li Bingman and his group. Unexpectedly, the situation suddenly changed and it turned out to be Xiaoling. Big advantage. Now Xiaoling called her, she stood over without thinking. Xiaoling looked around and said, the little flower girl is very nice. I didn't follow you to bully others, so there's no need to run around in circles. Li Bingman stared at Xiahua with a pair of cold eyes like a wolf, threatening every word. Have you thought clearly? Do you want to side with Xiaoling? Xiahua was agitated, but she still bravely stood beside Xiaoling. Xiaoling protected Xiahua behind her and met Li Bingman's gaze. Bullying her is nothing, come to me if you have the ability. Aren't there many of you? What a pity, they will all suffer the same fate as you. Before Li Bingman could react, she had already said to the trainees present, you should line up for me one by one. Each of you should say a word to me and let me hear your voices. If you have scolded me, Li Bingman's lackeys all went to run around, and those who had no grievances against me came to Xiaohua's side. Xiaoling is not happy. It seems that even with the support of Principal Xia, her prestige is still not good. She sneered, "You don't want to, right? Then let's run together." "Don't," someone was immediately frightened. A thin boy stood up and said to her stumblingly, Xiaoling, I have never scolded you. Their affairs have nothing to do with me. Knowing that my physical strength is not good, I can only train step by step. If I am punished for 400 laps, there will definitely be problems. Xiaoling has an excellent memory for voices. She knew it as soon as she heard him speak. "Well, I recognize your voice. On the day you checked in, you said, the thermos bottle cap has the wrong number. You haven't scolded me, so just stand over." The boy was relieved and quickly stood by Xiaohua's side. Since someone started, a few more people stood up one after another. These were all people who had never scolded Xiaoling, but there were not many of them. A few people who originally wanted to please Li Bingman, but now that the trend has changed, they tried to stay safe and get through. One of them stood up and said to Xiaoling, "Xiaoling, I thought you were beautiful from the first day I saw you, really." After saying that, he tried to stand on Xiaohua's side. "Wu Lanhai," someone in the crowd scolded, "you coward. Just now you were scolding Xiaoling with us so vigorously, why did you stop recognizing her in the blink of an eye?" "Coward. I didn't," Wu Lanhai hurriedly defended. "Classmate Xiaoling, please listen to my explanation. This is because they don't like me and framed me. I have never scolded you. You believe me?" Xiaoling looked at him with a sneer. "Get out." "Ah. Go out and run laps," Xiaoling said. "You called me poor and unworthy of carrying Li Bingman's shoes. Have you forgotten what you just said?" 500 laps. She looked down on those who followed Li Bingman, and even more on the outsiders. Classmate Xiaoling, Wu Lanhai was anxious, but he didn't expect that he would be self-defeating and would be given an extra lap. He wanted to say something more, but Principal Xia coughed majestically. "Student Wu, please do not disrupt the order of the class. If you make any more noise, you will have your credits deducted." Wu Lanhai immediately stopped talking. Emperor's credits are notoriously difficult to earn, and they already knew this after they had just entered school. Now that things have come to this, he doesn't want to lose even his credits. He drooped his head and left the classroom in dismay. With Wu Lanhai's example, no one tried to muddle through. For a moment, everyone stopped moving. The people on Li Bingman's side were clearly separated from those on Xiaoling's side. The classroom was deathly silent. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1063. Chapter 1063. Who else? Xiaoling stood in the middle of the classroom, her thin silk dress billowing in the breeze of late summer and early autumn. Outside the door, a ray of sunlight and dust hit her, making her look a little hazy and unreal. She raised her chin slightly, like a goddess of victory, and her sweet voice seemed to reveal the chill of autumn. "Still, anyone?" No one spoke or moved. "Then, that's it." She seemed a little tired, she said softly, turned around and walked out, leaving a classroom full of people, looking at each other. "Get out of class is over first." Principal Xia looked at the time and said to Teacher Haydena, "We will make up for this class later. You guys dash." He pointed at Xiahua and the others, "Go help Xiaoling carry her luggage." Xiahua and the others are naturally very happy. Emperor Training Camp is very hierarchical. The headmaster of the school year can make any student of the same grade do anything. Otherwise, everyone will fight to be the headmaster of the school year. It was natural for Xiahua and the others to help Xiaoling carry her luggage, not to mention that Xiaoling had just taken office today and had not yet designated a class committee member. As long as she worked harder and tried to please Xiaoling, maybe the class committee list would fall on her? Although the power of the class committee is not as great as that of the chief, they still belong to the upper class of the pyramid. They can usually control people lower than themselves with ease and have many privileges. Several people went as quickly as possible. What about us, Li Hua, the disciplinary committee member? Oh no, the former disciplinary committee member asked. You guys. Didn't classmate Xiaoling tell you to run laps? Go quickly. If you can't finish 400 laps or 500 laps, Principal Xia said, looking at the unlucky child sympathetically, then you can't come to the classroom. More than 10 days are enough for everyone to widen the gap. We are not convinced. Li Bingman was still indignant. Principal Xia spread his hands and expressed that he was helpless. Even I can't violate the emperor's rules since the founding of the school. Bingman, it's not that I won't help you, I really can't help you. After speaking, he sighed deliberately and then slowly walked away. Li Bingman and his group were left standing awkwardly in the classroom, neither moving forward nor retreating. Sister Bingman, what should I do? Finally, someone spoke up. Li Bingman glared at the man fiercely. What else can we do? Run, finish the run as soon as possible so that class can resume as soon as possible. She wants to be a big star, and the acting career of an actress is like fireworks. The most beautiful years are short and precious. She must race against time and can't afford to waste a day. The man who was glared at by her lowered his head and dared not speak in anger. What? She was obviously the one who had a conflict with Xiaoling, and when she lost the fight, she made them angry. Why did she make it look like they had offended her? This Li Bingman has such a strong background as Sister Queen, but she can't even compete with a little girl. She must be too weak. Compared with Xiaoling, those who support her not only do not have to be punished, but also have the opportunity to serve as class committee members, which is really enviable and jealous. There are already many people who are running in pain while thinking whether they are following the wrong boss. Xiaoling, on the other hand, knew nothing about all this. She rushed to the dormitory area with Xiahua and the others, pushed open the door of the chief's room in a 301, and threw all Li Bingman's things out unceremoniously. Those little followers wanted to show their loyalty, and each one worked harder than the other. Those who could treat the items Li Bingman put in the dormitory harshly would not be gentle. The soft pillows were torn, and the flower pots were beaten. It was broken into pieces. Even the handmade tea set her sister brought back from abroad could not escape the vicious hands and was shattered into pieces while being roughly carried by several trainees. A large pile of stuff, like discarded garbage, was still in the corridor, drawing sideways glances from people coming and going. There are not only first-year students living in this building, but also students from several other grades. I heard before that the first-year president was robbed of his room by Li Binjiao's sister. They all looked down upon Xiaoling as a chief executive. He didn't even have his own room. If you can't keep it, what qualifications do you have to be the chief? It is simply embarrassing to be their chief. Even in some grades, there are forces ready to use this topic to ridicule their own chief. So, although the chiefs looked down on Xiaoling, they also had no favorable impression of Li Bingman. People like Li Bingman, who broke the rules, were naturally not in the same camp as the chiefs. Now, seeing Li Bingman's things being thrown out, they all felt happy. The new chief doesn't seem to be that weak as he thought. Isn't it? How can a weak person be the chief? I said she will fight back sooner or later. Well done. I've been displeased with Li Bingman for a long time. She didn't give way to my senior sister when I saw her in the corridor. Are there any rules left? The news spread quickly, and many people passed by the door of room 301 on an excuse to watch Li Bingman's joke. By the way, let's take a look at what the real new chief looks like. Xiaoling grandly directed people to move her things inside. The little girl was lively. Seeing so many people watching at the door, she simply invited them to come in and sit down. I just came here, and I don't know if it is appropriate to decorate the room like this. It just so happens that everyone can help me look. By the way, I brought a lot of candy. Come on, let's eat some candy. She took out a large handful of gummy candies from her LV travel bag and distributed them to everyone. Those who are knowledgeable may know that this is a very expensive candy brand in Switzerland. It is all handmade and naturally made without any additives. The molds can also be customized according to the customer's needs. You need to make an appointment and have them shipped all the way by special plane. Even though the girls who can attend the training camp are from a good family, they only occasionally buy a few of these candies, take photos and upload them to their friends' circle to show off, and they can stay sweet for a long time. But the little girl in front of me actually has a lot of these candies. And you share it so generously with everyone. Does she think she is a jelly bean from a street stall? Two senior girls exchanged secret glances while eating sweets. Girl A, isn't it an imitation? Girl B, no, my dad brought it to me last year, and it smelled like this. They looked at Xiaoling's clothes. They were not from a famous brand, but the quality was very good. Someone even took the opportunity to help move things and touched her body. The feel of the dress was like a circle of gentle ripples, which was so beautiful. Intoxicated. The suitcase on the side is from Rimowa, and the silk scarf used casually to tie up the hair turns out to be Hermes upon closer inspection. There are also small furnishings on the table, towels, and toothbrushes. Everything is exquisite. Several girls were shocked and confused. These things are not fake no matter how you look at them. Who was the one who said before that the freshmen of this class are so poor that they even borrowed the BMW they bought when they entered school? So ignorant. A girl cleared her throat and asked Xiaoling casually, Xiaoling, the silk scarf on your head is really beautiful. Did you buy it yourself? End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1064. Chapter 1064 Show off a little. Xiaoling was originally studying the placement of a pot of hydroponic plants. After hearing this, she turned around and smiled brightly, really? Do you think it looks good too? Originally, the stylist at home said that she would put diamonds on me. It was a hairpin, but I thought it was heavy and didn't like it, so I just pulled the silk scarf over. I mean, my brother gave me a dozen. If you like it, wait until I get home next time. I'll bring one for you. Really, the girl was pleasantly surprised, but confused. Why is that so embarrassing? What are you embarrassed about? It's just a silk scarf, Xiaoling said with a smile. She didn't know the value of the silk scarf, and Pei Xian had never told her that anything she liked and thought was good, no matter how expensive or rare, would be fully prepared for her. In Xiaoling's eyes, this silk scarf is no different from the one sold in shopping malls. The girl hesitated and thanked her. Some of the girls around were extremely envious, and at the same time they were certain of one thing: Xiaoling was really rich, richer than they imagined. Unable to help being curious, they asked her again, Xiaoling, I heard that the BMW you were riding in was borrowed on the day you came to register? Why didn't you take your own car? Xiaoling was stunned for a moment. Why do you ask this? Several girls looked at each other, and one of them said, don't blame us for gossiping. Li Bingman said before that you can't afford to go to training camp, and your family doesn't even have a decent car. This was the first time Xiaoling heard such a statement, and she was very angry. Humph, she is poor. My family is much richer than hers. Unknowingly, she regarded Pei Xian as her own family, and his family was her home. However, as soon as the words came out, I suddenly realized that something was wrong. What had I promised to keep a low profile? Woohoo, what kind of family background does Li Bingman come from? She is the sister of the Queen of Heaven. She may not be from a super wealthy family, but she is not short of money either. If it were placed in the circle of the Pei family, the Li family would indeed not be able to get on the stage, but what if it was placed in the circle of trainees? The families who can send their children here are all somewhat rich but not super rich. Li Bingman is a very rich lady. If she is said to be richer than Li Bingman, wouldn't it be exposed? Sure enough, I heard Xiahua praise, Xiaoling, I knew you were not an ordinary person. Xiaoling is about to cry, woo woo woo, what about keeping a low profile as promised? Actually, my family is just average, she said in a low voice, trying to remedy the situation. A girl wearing an emerald ring chuckled, okay, Xiaoling, stop pretending. We can't afford a full set of your Swiss candies, these bags, and Hermes. Who would believe you if you say you're like a normal family? Xiaoling's eyes widened slightly, are these things expensive? Pretending too much is pride, a senior class president said half-jokingly. It's not shameful to admit it if you have money, and it can be used to irritate those who don't like you. You can't. I hope some people will continue to spread bad words about you and slander you. This is actually. Xiaoling was furious when she thought of the contemptuous faces of Li Bingman and his gang. Looking at the bags, accessories, and candies on the table, Xiaoling decided to be a little loud and reveal a little bit, well, the car that was sent to me that day was borrowed. My brother's car was too eye-catching. Inappropriate. The girls let out another small exclamation. What car is it? They asked curiously. Xiaoling smiled slightly and said nothing. She didn't want to expose Pei Xian's Rolls-Royce yet. The driver's uncle once told her that there were only a few such cars in the entire city. If she exposed it and someone with an interest in checking it out, her identity might be found out. Woolen cloth. Eat candies. She grabbed another handful of candies and gave them to everyone. The girls laughed playfully and changed the topic sensibly. Ever since they discovered that Xiaoling was actually super rich, her status in their hearts had changed. In the past, she was just a freshman chief executive with a mediocre background who could be friends with or not, but now she has become a rich and beautiful woman worth making friends with. Who doesn't want to have more rich friends? There are some who are thoughtful and think more. Li Bingman's background is so tough, how could she be kicked out by this little girl so arrogantly? Unless this little girl's background is tougher. A group of people had their own thoughts and played with Xiaoling all afternoon. On the playground, Li Bingman and a group of trainees were sweating profusely from running. It was almost nightfall, but they still had not completed the required 100 laps. Li Bingman felt that her legs were as heavy as lead, and sweat was sticky on her body, which was extremely uncomfortable. What made her even more uncomfortable was that at some point, there were many people watching near the playground. They pointed, covered their mouths and snickered from time to time, which made her very angry but helpless. Xiaoling. She remembered this name, she must cut this into pieces. No, I can't. A girl running beside Li Bingman stopped in despair. I really can't run anymore, let's take a rest. After saying that, she collapsed on the ground. Li Bingman ignored her and ran forward. An extra hour of rest would be a waste of an hour of class. She couldn't afford to delay. She would insist on finishing the course no matter how difficult it was. One after another, many people fell behind and gave up, planning to rest and eat before continuing to run. Xiaoling only stipulated that they run 100 laps a day, but did not stipulate that they were not allowed to rest in the middle. Many people took advantage of this loophole and hid. Too lazy. Li Bingman looked down upon them. Didn't he know that the more he rested during long-distance running, the more tired he would be? She gritted her teeth and ran forward, her ears ringing and her vision gradually blurred by sweat. Suddenly, she heard a panicked voice coming from a distant place, Sister Bingman, no, it's not good. She had no time to pay attention and continued to run mechanically. The voice got closer, and several people followed her, saying right next to her, "Sister Bingman, go and have a look." Xiaoling brought a group of people and threw all your things out of the dormitory. Your favorite tea set was also broken by them. What? Li Bingman was caught off guard and stopped suddenly. How dare she? Anger welled up in waves, and Li Bingman finally stopped running. She roughly pushed aside the people around her and rushed toward the dormitory. Several of her followers quickly followed her pace. Near the playground, the onlookers were very excited when they noticed this scene. They told each other, "Look, Li Bingman is going to settle a score with Xiaoling. Let's follow him quickly and have a look. It's fun to watch." The large army followed Li Bingman in a mighty manner, all moving towards the dormitory building. Li Bingman rushed up to the corridor on the third floor. The first thing he saw was the mess on the ground. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1065. Chapter 1065. The one is ebbing and the other is ebbing. Her things were all thrown in the hallway. The pillow was torn, the feathers were scattered, the porcelain was broken, and the mess was like a joke. Li Bingman never thought that someone would dare to treat her like this. Her hands and feet were so angry that she didn't know how to react. The laughter coming from the room at the end of the corridor sounded so harsh. Li Bingman finally came to her senses, rushed into the room with 3 steps at a time, and shouted, "Xiaoling." The room suddenly became quiet, and 7 or 8 girls turned back to look at her, with surprise and unwelcome written on their faces. Surrounded by people, Xiaoling was sitting on the edge of a wooden table. Next to her was a translucent ice-cracked glass vase, in which a bunch of evergreen plants were planted with clear water. The sunlight shone through the branches and leaves of the plant on the girl's delicate and small body. On his face, he looked like an elf who had strayed into the human world. How could she be so leisurely and beautiful? "Get out of here," Li Bingman couldn't help but say. At this moment, she lost her manners. "This dormitory is obviously mine. If you don't get out, I will be rude to you." "How can you be rude to me?" Xiaoling laughed softly, supporting the table with both hands, swaying her white calves and looking at her. "Drag me out? Complain to the principal or your sister? I'm very curious." Li Bingman was furious. She really couldn't answer the question. Drag Xiaoling out? It was impossible for her and the few people around her. They had just finished running and their physical strength was almost at its limit. But what about Xiaoling? There are also many people, and everyone is waiting for work. Sign a complaint to the principal? Don't be stupid, Principal Xia is clearly targeting Xiaoling. Li Bingman still hasn't figured out why he turned to Xiaoling. Maybe it was to maintain the school's traditions and rules. After all, Xiaoling was the legitimate chief. However, this Principal Xia is too old-fashioned. He is just the chief freshman. How can he compete with the Queen's sister? What's more, the training camp chief changes every school year and is ranked based on test scores. It's still unknown whether Xiaoling can keep her position as chief next school year. Li Bingman felt that this Principal Xia was really unreasonable. When she becomes famous in the future, she must take care of the principal. But that is all in the future. Now, she is helpless about Principal Xia's decision. As for looking for my sister? That's not realistic. It's not easy to be a queen. She is beautiful on the surface, but in private it takes more hardship and effort than ordinary people. My sister is extremely busy every day. If she bothers her with such a trivial matter, her sister will definitely be very angry. She didn't dare to make her sister angry. Li Bingman looked at Xiaoling and realized that there was really nothing he could do against her. In desperation, she looked around at the people in Xiaoling's room. "You are all facing her? Don't regret it? Why are you talking to senior sister?" A senior leader was dissatisfied and scolded Li Bingman condescendingly, "I don't care what your background is. Since you are in the training camp, you must abide by the rules of the training camp. Do you understand?" She was originally a little wary of Li Bingman, but when Xiaoling brought out so many Swiss candies, brand name bags, and silk scarves, the senior principal discovered that it was not certain who had the greater background, Xiaoling or Li Bingman. Since even Principal Xia chose to side with Xiaoling, then she must have made the right choice. Li Bingman was so angry that she fell back. "Don't go too far. I advise you, don't embarrass yourself here." Xiaoling finished eating a candy and licked her fingers with some lingering interest. "Hurry up and settle down where you should go before it gets dark. Otherwise, it's none of my business if those things in your corridor are thrown away as by the dormitory ant." "You," Li Bingman remembered those things, "you have broken so many of my things, you know how valuable are those things, what do you want to pay for them?" "Oh, I'm so sorry." Xiaoling said she was sorry, but actually she didn't mean to be sorry at all. "Are those things of yours valuable?" "Why don't I think so? Let's just say that set of teacups. The pattern is really ugly." "What the is that? What kind of aesthetic taste does a person have to be able to endure using it?" "Ha ha ha," many girls in the room laughed. A follower next to Li Bingman said, "That's because you don't know. That set of teacups is a handmade product brought back from abroad by Bingman's sister, the Queen Li Binjiao. It's the only set in the world. It's very precious. Xiaoling, even if you lose everything, you can't afford it?" "Who are you kidding?" Xiaoling snorted coldly, playing with the candy and tossing it up and down carelessly. "Handmade product. The only one in the world? I'll go out later and find a pottery bar. I'll ask Xiahua and the others. Go and burn a set, it's still handmade and unique in the world." "Well," Xiahua said, holding back a smile, "it's so precious." Li Bingman was almost furious. "If you damage my things, I have to pay for it." Xiaoling Qing said calmly, "If you didn't put the things in my room, how could they be damaged? I see things that don't belong to me in my own room, so naturally I dispose of them as garbage." "You are shameless," Li Bingman couldn't help shouting. Haha, Xiaoling was too lazy to pay attention to her. She stretched out her hand to cover her mouth and yawned, "I'm tired. Get out of here and take your pile of garbage away with me. Otherwise, I'll wait for you. I'll ask the dormitory ant to clean up soon." Li Bingman stared at her with red eyes, wishing to smash her confident face, but the hero did not suffer the immediate disadvantage, endured it again and again, and then managed to suppress his anger and turned around and walked out. The few doglegs following Li Bingman looked at each other in confusion. Couldn't they? They ran over so aggressively to accuse them, but in the end they didn't gain anything, but were kicked out by someone else. Is it really the right decision for them to follow Li Bingman? What makes them even more envious and jealous is yet to come. Within a few days, news spread in the training camp. The new chief freshman brought several Hermes scarves from home, one for each of the girls who came to help and visit during the move that day. It turns out that she is not a poor country girl at all, she is a white, rich, and beautiful girl who is hidden. And follow her to eat some meat. Many people who followed Li Bingman were still jogging on the playground in pain. Not only did they get nothing, but they also had to endure Li Bingman's cold face every day. In contrast, Xiaoling's side was as happy as heaven. One after another, some people deserted Li Bingman's camp and expressed their loyalty to Xiaoling. Xiaoling is of course very happy. She does not have much desire for power, but she is extremely happy with anything that makes Li Bingman unhappy. She accepted all those who surrendered with a smile and gave them valuable gifts. "I slept in a sleeper berth on the train yesterday, and climbed to Jiaiguan all day today. My energy and physical strength are at the bottom, and I still have to catch the early morning train home tomorrow, so I will update 2 times. I'll be on the train sleeper all day tomorrow, 3 updates as normal, provided the network is okay and I can post. If I can't post, I'll update the day after tomorrow. Everyone, stick with it for the last few days. I'll go back to my home the night after tomorrow, and the updates will be stable. Already. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Sci-fi. Chapter 1066. Chapter 1066 Fanfare. Gradually, the situation for the first-year students stabilized. It is no longer two tigers fighting each other, but Xiaoling's family is the only one. There are fewer and fewer people supporting Li Bingman. The few die-hard loyalists either still have the dream of being supported by the Queen's sister, or they have offended Xiaoling so much that they cannot integrate into Xiaoling's side. Group. They gathered together all day long to speak ill of Xiaoling, but that was all. There was no more way to threaten her. Who made Xiaoling so outstanding, no matter in appearance, status, or academic performance? Better than Li Bingman? Comparing people with each other will make people angry. Xiaoling proudly called Pei Xian and showed off her recent results. Brother Pei, I am very popular in the training camp. Isn't it great? Pei Xian looked out the window at the light blue sky, with a soft smile deep in his eyes. In fact, he knew every move she made in the training camp, and he even knew how many expensive accessories and candies she gave out in order to win people's hearts. However, it didn't matter, as long as she was happy. What do you want to eat when you come back on the weekend? He asked. I'll ask Mama Jo to cook it for you. I want to eat grilled salmon, she said happily. Xiahua said the salmon in this season is delicious. Pei Xian said, okay. He gave her a few more words and hung up the phone. Nowadays, the two of them can only see each other every weekend during school holidays. The time is short but precious, and they cherish it. Xiaoling hummed softly as she dug out everything in the closet and gestured in front of the floor-length mirror, wondering what to wear when she went to see Brother Pei on the weekend. On Friday afternoon, there is dance class. Xiaoling put her favorite white dress in the dressing room behind the dance studio and carefully put it away before taking out her practice clothes and changing into them. While changing, she thought about whether Brother Pei would like the white skirt she chose. I have never worn it in front of him. Slightly distracted. Smooth little feet stepped into dancing shoes. Ah, she suddenly cried out, feeling that something had pricked her foot hard, and the pain was excruciating. What's wrong? Several students nearby who were also changing into practice clothes looked over and gathered around her and asked with concern, Xiaoling, are you okay? Xiaoling frowned and reluctantly took her foot out of her shoe. When she looked down, she saw blood flowing profusely and a rusty iron nail stuck on it. Everyone's expressions changed with fear. Who is so wicked as to put nails into shoes? Hurry up and call the teacher to send Xiaoling to the hospital, a calmer student said. There is so much rust on this nail. If it gets infected, it will be troublesome to get tetanus. Everyone thought it was reasonable and carried Xiaoling out while looking for the teacher. Amid the hustle and bustle, Xiaoling looked up with a pale face and saw Li Bingman, a few rows of closets away, looking over here with a faint smile on her lips. The two people's eyes met. Li Bingman took his time and his smile deepened. Is her? Perhaps it was her female intuition. Xiaoling recognized the culprit at a glance. He was taken to the hospital, cleaned, bandaged, and worked on until very late at night. Pei Xian hurried over to see her, held her hand and asked, why are you so careless? She complained weakly and aggrievedly, that Li Bingman is so vicious. He actually put nails in my dancing shoes. I don't care, I will stab her hard. It hurts me to death, Wu. Pei Xian put her head into his arms comfortingly. The originally pleasant weekend was not so pleasant due to her foot injury. Pei Zion brought up the old words again, do you want to come back for a day trip? Xiaoling curled her lips, she put nails in my dancing shoes, not snakes in my quilt. It doesn't matter whether she goes to school or not. If you put a snake under the quilt, will you be willing to go to school? Humph, no, I will catch 10 snakes and put them back. Pei Zion silently imagined the scene of having more than a dozen snakes placed in his quilt, and stopped the topic. Xiaoling returned to the training camp on Monday. The square at the school gate was crowded with people. Many people gathered in front of a notice, which basically said, first-year freshman Li Bingman has misbehaved and will be dismissed from school. Quit school. Xiaoling was shocked and pulled the classmate next to her, Li Bingman is really going to be expelled, oh my god, could it be because of putting nails in her shoes on Friday? The classmate next to him also looked like he had seen a ghost. No, how long has school started, and we have to send Li Bingman away? She is Li Binjiao's sister. I heard that the chief of the first grade is particularly arrogant and domineering, a senior student who didn't know Xiaoling said, she has always been at odds with Li Bingman. Could it be that she framed something that made Li Bingman drop out of school? Xiaoling, I am the particularly arrogant and domineering chief of the first grade. Senior students. Everyone who could run within 3 feet of her ran away, just kidding, what kind of fuel-saving lamp can someone like Li Bingman expel from school casually? They don't want to get into trouble with this. Xiaoling felt aggrieved, obviously she hurt my foot first. Unfortunately, the voice was too low and not many people heard it. Carrying the daily necessities she brought from home, she pushed aside the crowd and walked to the dormitory. Along the way, many trainees paid attention to her and said, look, even this freshman chief, who doesn't know where he came from, collapsed. Here's Li Bingman. Stay away from her in the future. That's right, that's right. That's not necessarily true. I heard that Li Bingman provoked her first and sought her own death. Besides, it may not be that she has any background. I heard that Li Bingman put nails in her shoes first. The school cannot tolerate such bloodshed, right? That's nonsense. Last year, Zhou Fang, who was in the 3rd grade, beat Luanan until he was bleeding. He was only given a warning. How could it be so serious when it happened to Li Bingman? There must be some inside story. Perhaps Li Bingman was fired for other reasons. For a time, there were different opinions. Xiaoling returned to the dormitory to put away her things. In just a short period of time, several groups of people came to her, either asking directly or making indirect inquiries about Li Bingman's dropout. Xiaoling was too lazy to deal with it. She didn't know any more than they did. Maybe Brother Pei made the decision to vent her anger, but she hadn't asked Brother Pei yet. Simply put up a small wooden sign saying close the door and thank guests. She locked herself in the room and called Pei Zion. Did you do it? She asked Pei Zion. Pei Zion knew what she was asking as soon as he heard it. This is a surprise I gave you, do you like it? Xiaoling felt sour in her heart. She was touched and flattered, you don't have to make such a big show of it. Not tonight, good night. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1067. Chapter 1067, Expulsion is a minor offense. Pei Zion said, no one can bully you. He promised to give her the best, that is, the best, without any discount. Xiaoling turned her head, listening to his deep and magnetic voice on the phone, and her eyes unconsciously fell on the handful of Swiss candies he gave her on the table. Since being adopted by him, she has always felt that she is loved, and that feeling has made her more and more at ease. Maybe, as he said, she will never have to worry about being abandoned. Her beautiful eyes were filled with a smile. After hanging up the phone, she took a good shower and went out to practice singing in the music classroom. It was autumn, and the weather was a bit cool. She wore a light-colored skirt, carefully combed her long hair, and walked slowly from the dormitory area to the teaching area. As she came and went, many people looked at her sideways on the street, some were amazed at her beauty, and some were talking about Li Bingman's expulsion. Everything, she turned a deaf ear to. As she walked to the door of the teaching building, she was stopped by someone. She looked up and saw that it was Li Bingman. "A good dog doesn't block the way." Xiaoling was rude to Li Bingman and said with a frown. Her voice was a bit loud, and many people nearby heard it, and they all turned their heads to look over. Li Bingman's face turned red and white, and she endured it again and again before saying, "Xiaoling, I have something to say to you." "What are you talking about?" Xiaoling asked impatiently. She still had to practice singing. Li Bingman was disturbed by the various looks around her and whispered, "Let me buy you some coffee. I know there is a very good coffee shop near the school. Can we go there and talk?" Xiaoling was still impatient. "I don't drink coffee. If you have anything to say, just say it here." Li Bingman was frustrated and even more embarrassed, but how could she have the nerve to say something in front of so many trainees watching the excitement? She had to humble herself. "Don't drink coffee? Then I'll treat you to dinner. What do you like to eat? I'll order it now." She didn't believe that Xiaoling didn't even like to eat. But even if Xiaoling likes to eat, she really doesn't like to eat with her. "Come on, I can't eat anything just looking at your face. Li Bingman, aren't you very capable? Take this from me and that from me, and you put nails in my dancing shoes. You deserve to be expelled from school. Don't come to me to plead for mercy." She guessed that Li Bingman came to her for something. The two are now on the same page, and Li Bingman can be so humble. It must be about dropping out of school. "Sure enough," Li Bingman said reluctantly, "I was wrong." "Just admit your mistake," Xiaoling said angrily when she saw her. "Go home quickly and reflect. Don't block my way here." "Get out of the way," she said, bypassing Li Bingman and heading towards the teaching building. "Xiaoling," Li Bingman became anxious and grabbed her hand. "Let go." Xiaoling was very unhappy and threw her away. Unexpectedly, Li Bingman lost her balance and fell down the white marble steps. Fortunately, the stairs were not high, only 5 or 6 steps, so no serious injuries were caused to the person, but he still looked like he had a bruised forehead, and his body was covered in ash, and he was in a miserable state. Xiaoling was frightened. After seeing that she was fine, she yelled at her, "What are you doing? If you fall, I'll have to pay for your medical expenses." She was really angry. Who is this Li Bingman? Isn't it a case of porcelain? Many of the trainees watching the excitement silently wiped the cold sweat from their heads. The first-year leader is so fierce. Although Li Bingman took care of her fall first, she still yelled at them after they fell like this. How much hatred and strong psychological quality is this? Over there, Li Bingman got up in embarrassment. "Xiaoling, I..." She hesitated for a moment, and when she saw Xiaoling turned around and started to leave again, she finally seemed to make up her mind. Regardless of the various looks around her, she said loudly, "Look." Xiaoling had already walked into the teaching building, but when she heard this, she turned back curiously. Li Bingman bent down and took off her shoes, revealing a pair of feet wrapped in white gauze. The white gauze was stained with blood, which looked weird and scary. "What's going on?" The onlookers were talking about it. Why did Li Bingman's feet become like this? Xiaoling also frowned. "Show me, what does this mean?" "Xiaoling, I was wrong before. I couldn't see the mountain." Li Bingman apologized to Xiaoling, regardless of the number of people or the lack of face. "I shouldn't have troubled you, let alone hurt you. In order to apologize, I stabbed my 2 feet, please forgive me. You can do whatever you want." Xiaoling was puzzled. "Did you stab yourself?" "Yes," Li Bingman said, "please forgive me." The cool breeze of early autumn made Xiaoling shiver. It was not the most terrifying thing for a person to pierce others with nails. The most terrifying thing was that he could do such a cruel thing to himself. If you don't go into the Emperor's training camp, you can go into another training camp. Just to ask for my forgiveness, is it worth it? Xiaoling asked her. Besides, the expulsion was made by the school, so it may not be useful if you beg me. But Li Bingman said, I know it's useful to beg you. Xiaoling, no, Miss Xia, I heard my sister say it. She told me who you are. It's only my fault that I was blind before and wanted to compete with you. When he received the notice of withdrawal from school, Li Bingman felt it was very ridiculous and unbelievable. He went to question the school aggressively, but was driven away by the school like a plague. Li Bingman was very angry. After returning home, she immediately told her sister Li Binjiao about the incident. She said to Li Binjiao, who the is Xiaoling? How dare you provoke me? Sister, go and put pressure on the school and ask them to withdraw the punishment against me and expel Xiaoling. Otherwise, my face will be ruined. Where to put it? If they slap me in the face, they will slap you in the face. That Principal Xia really doesn't care about you anymore. Li Binjiao was shocked. What did you say the girl's name was? Xiaoling, 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 Ling Luo Silk and Satin Ling. Let alone this city, I have never heard of any big family named Xia in the whole country. How dare she mess with me? Li Bingman is she heard that Xiaoling was well dressed from head to toe, and even the gifts she gave were Hermes and Swiss handmade candies, but she decided that this was Xiaoling's bluff, trying to win people over by pretending to be fat. Nonsense, Li Binjiao was shocked and shouted angrily, who are you messing with? Why don't you mess with Xiaoling? Do you know who she is? She is the girl recently adopted by Chairman Pei Ziyan. What? Li Bingman was stunned. Li Binjiao took a deep breath and managed to hold back from slapping this troublesome sister. It's easy to fire you. Go and apologize to Xiaoling quickly. That little is very grudge. Why, if you are grudged by her, just wait and cry after you get in. Not to mention Li Bingman, even Li Binjiao will probably be implicated. Yingying finally got off the train, but she's still on the road and hasn't reached home. 3 updates tonight. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1068. Chapter 1068 Chu Chen's Visit. That's why Li Binjiao is so anxious to get angry. Li Bingman was stunned. How could it be? How could that little girl have such a big origin? It was as unreal as a fantasy. She shook her head. Sister, is there something wrong? If she really had such a big background, she should have said it out long ago. Why are you hiding it? Li Binjiao was also filled with hatred. That little likes to hide her identity. Otherwise, she would have suffered such a big loss in the Emperor Company building last time. At that time, she cried at the elevator entrance for a whole afternoon until her eyes were swollen to walnuts before she was let go. How many people saw her jokes that afternoon? Until now, her arch-enemy Yunyan has been taunting her about this matter every day. However, this matter was so embarrassing that she never told Li Bingman. When that little was about to take the training camp exam, she should have warned Li Bingman. Tell me what kind of conflict you had with her from beginning to end, Li Binjiao ordered his sister. So, Li Bingman told everything from the time the two met and became enemies in the selection competition to the recent events. Li Binjiao was frightened when she heard this and scolded, why didn't you tell me about such a big thing earlier? Li Bingman is also aggrieved. The Li sisters are all arrogant. Just like Li Binjiao would not tell her sister that she cried all afternoon in the elevator, Li Bingman would not tell her sister that she lost the title of school year leader. It's so embarrassing. It's too late to say anything now. Li Bingman asked her sister pitifully, then what should I do now? Li Binjiao gritted his teeth, what else can I do? Ask her to admit your mistake. No matter what the price, you must make her forgive you. Judging from the last incident in the Emperor's elevator, Pei Xian obviously doted on Xiaoling to the core. Going to school, training camps and everything else are just trivial matters. I'm afraid both sisters' stardom will be ruined. Li Bingman could only nod. As soon as the two sisters decided on their plan, someone rang the doorbell. The two sisters looked at each other, and it was Li Binjiao who opened the door. "Mr. Chu," she was extremely surprised. Chu Chen is the general manager of the agency center, and is also the agent of the Emperor's popular actor Zhou Jingzi and the singer Luo Xian. He is nothing like her. The two of them could not be said to be familiar with each other. What is he doing at home? Chu Chen was wearing a well-tailored suit and was polite. "Excuse me, can I go in? You are a rare guest that I can't even invite, please come quickly," Li Binjiao said with a smile. The relationship between artists and managers is usually either the east wind prevails over the west wind, or the west wind prevails over the east wind. Strong artists can boss their managers around, and strong managers also have an overwhelming advantage in front of artists. In the case of Emperor, a very large company with many stars and strong star-making ability, Chu Chen, as the general manager of the brokerage center, has a higher status than a first-line superstar. Chu Chen walked into the room slowly and took a seat. "Is this Miss Li Bingman?" He looked at Li Bingman. Li Bingman was flattered. She had long heard her sister talk about the Emperor's condition, and she also paid close attention to the news in the entertainment industry. She deeply understood how powerful Mr. Chu was. It is a great honor to meet you." She tried her best to hide the joy in her heart, and tried to sit upright to give Chu Chen a good impression. "I once heard my sister complain that her current agent was not good. If she were replaced by Chu Chen, she would definitely leave Yunyan's competitor far behind. However, unless there are special reasons, the Emperor rarely changes agents. My sister has no chance, but what about me? There are still many days to come. How happy would it be if Chu Chen could take care of her when she debuts in the future?" Li Bingman became more and more excited as she thought about it, looking at the man opposite her with shining eyes. Chu Chen was still polite. "Miss Li Bingman, I'm here to see you this time." Looking for me," Li Bingman was surprised, followed by a burst of ecstasy. What a good thing it is to be found by a big shot like Chu Chen. Could it be that Chu Chen took a fancy to himself and intended to support him? I heard that in the history of Emperor, there was a situation like this, where trainees had not yet graduated, but they debuted early because they were spotted by their managers or talent scouts. Anyone who debuted like this was a carefully selected talent. Li Binjiao's heart skipped a beat. She understood who Chu Chen was better than her sister. Although her sister had a little talent, she was definitely not noticed by Chu Chen, who had a higher eye than her. So, why did he pay attention to a little girl? There is only one possibility. Mr. Chu. Li Binjiao secretly hated her sister for causing trouble, but had to plead for her. "If you have anything to do, just tell me. Bingman is still young and not sensible. Please forgive me if there is any offense. Li Bingman is unhappy." "Sister, what does this mean? Not giving her a chance? Sister, is she jealous of her?" "Mr. Chu, my sister is being polite to you," Li Bingman said with a smile. "I am not young anymore, how can I always rely on my sister? If you have anything, just tell me directly." "Bingman," Li Binjiao was extremely anxious. Chu Chen smiled half-heartedly. "It's true that the love between sisters is deep." Li Bingman's smile contained a hint of flattery. "Thank you, Mr. Chu, for the compliment." In that case, Chu Chen slowly opened the briefcase he carried with him and took out something wrapped in white paper. "Miss Li Bingman, please handle this matter yourself. The chairman heard that you Miss Yaling was very angry because she put nails in her dancing shoes, so I decided to give you a small punishment." "What?" Li Bingman was dumbfounded. Li Binjiao vaguely guessed that this would be the case, and her heart sank. She suppressed her uneasiness and said with a forced smile, "Mr. Chu, Bingman is ignorant and has offended Miss Ya. I was just teaching her a lesson." She didn't mean it. She already knew she was wrong. "Real?" Chu Chen said slowly, "Why, don't you want to accept the punishment from the chairman?" "I wish," Li Binjiu broke into a cold sweat. Standing in front of this man, she felt like she had nothing to hide from, as if she was facing a mysterious and dangerous beast. "I'm not asking you," Chu Chen said softly. "I." Li Bingman was so nervous that sweat appeared on her forehead. She never imagined that Chu Chen came here for this matter. All her dreams of success and all her charming fantasies disappeared without a trace at this moment. She just secretly hated herself in her heart, hating how she had offended Pei Ziyan, and even more hating that Xiaoling for hiding her identity. Chu Chen slowly opened the white paper bag in his hand. Under the light of the living room, he could see two rusty iron nails lying quietly in the paper bag. In an instant, Li Bingman guessed what he was going to do, and her face turned pale with fear. I don't want it," she said tremblingly. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1069. Chapter 1069. The Obedient Little Sheep. Li Binjiu also turned pale with fright. "Mr. Chu, what do you mean?" "It's not my intention, it's the chairman's," Chu Chen still said calmly. The chairman was very distressed when he saw Miss Xiaoling's injury. He said that those who have hurt Miss Xiaoling must pay double the amount. "Li Binjiu, you should be lucky that your sister only stabbed Xiaoling once, otherwise, he. Li Binjiu didn't dare to plead for mercy anymore. Having been in the emperor for so many years, she generally understood Pei Ziyan's temperament, and there was no room for bargaining on any decision he made. These two nails were obvious, they were meant to retaliate, by driving two nails into Li Bingman's feet. If Li Bingman had just accepted it, this grudge might have passed away like this. If not. Li Binjiu shuddered. She had already offended that little Xiaoling once. If her sister offended her again, would the emperor still have a foothold for them in the future? Her contract with the emperor will not expire until 8 years later. During these 8 years, the emperor can hide her as he pleases. As for 8 years later, she will be old and sallow, so it will be too late. She cannot afford to take this risk. "Bingman, take off your shoes and stretch out your feet," she ordered. Li Bingman looked at the two nails in fear, then at Chu Chen and her sister, and understood what they meant. "Don't be like this," she was so frightened that she almost cried. "I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Can I buy a gift for Xiaoling and come to apologize to her? Sister, don't let me get stabbed. Don't." Seeing his sister begging like this, why would Li Binjiu be willing to do it? However, if these two nails are not driven in today, the end will be waiting for their sisters in the future. "Stretch out," Li Binjiu said sternly, "don't let me do it." Chu Chen watched with interest and smiled. "If you two are afraid, I can find someone to help." "No need," Li Binjiu quickly stopped him and forced a smile. "Isn't it just a matter of driving two nails? Bingman can do it by himself. Really, who knows if Chu Chen asks someone to help, will the situation escalate?" Li Bingman's eyes welled up with tears. "There is rust on this nail, and I will get tetanus." "The nail you used to plot against Miss Xiaoling also had rust on it," Chu Chen said. "Why aren't you worried about Miss Xiaoling getting tetanus?" He raised his wrist and looked at the valuable watch on his wrist. "It's getting late, Miss Li Bingman, please hurry up, I have other things to do." Li Bingman looked at the two nails with fear, not daring to stretch out her feet. Chu Chen lazily stood up and picked up his briefcase. "It seems that it is too late today. I will go back and report to the chairman. You two, take your leave. Mr. Chu, please stay, Li Binjiao shouted hurriedly, turning to glare at her sister. Hurry up and get stabbed. If Chu Chen returns without success today, who knows what kind of harsher punishment awaits them tomorrow. But Li Bingman still didn't dare. She looked at her sister pleadingly. Mr. Chu has said that he will go back and take a new life. Maybe the chairman will take back his life tomorrow. Innocent, Li Binjiao hates that iron cannot become steel. How long has it been since this idiot sister has not seen the reality clearly? She bent down and took the 2 nails from the coffee table, stood them up on the ground, and shouted to Li Bingman, take off your shoes quickly and step on them. If you don't step on them, I won't have you as my sister in the future. Elder sister. I will never be a sister with someone who is disrespectful to the chairman. Li Binjiao was really anxious. She had already prepared for the worst. If her sister would rather die than step on her, she would break off the relationship with her sister. Her popularity is at its peak, and she is at the right age, so she cannot let her sister hold her back. Li Bingman looked at her sister in surprise. She didn't expect her sister to be so decisive, and was stunned for a moment. No, sister, don't. She begged weakly. The Li family's parents were just self-employed people running small businesses. It was Li Binjiao who was afraid of being embarrassed after becoming famous, so they closed the grocery store and opened a cafe instead, doing a business that looked higher end, but in fact they could earn a lot of money every month. Very little, not enough to pay Li Bingman's tuition. If Li Binjiao disowns her, how can she continue to live in fine clothes? Quickly step on it, Li Binjiao said sternly, do you want to kill us all? Her fierce look finally frightened Li Bingman. Li Bingman took off his slippers with a tremble, and placed one foot in the air above the nail, but he couldn't step down. She was wrong, really wrong, she shouldn't have messed with Xiaoling. Chu Chen raised his wrist to look at his watch again. Li Binjiao didn't care anymore, rushed to her sister, held her shoulders, and pushed her down regardless. Wow, with a heart-rending scream, Li Bingman fell to the ground, holding her feet. There was a nail stuck in one of her feet, and blood was pouring out. Bingman, Li Binjiao felt distressed and squatted down to check on her sister's condition. Chu Chen's voice was slow and calm, there is still 1 foot. Li Binjiao was shocked, as if someone had poured a bucket of ice water on her in the middle of summer, and her whole body was stiff. I don't want it. Sister, I don't want it, Li Bingman cried like a pig, desperately curling up her uninjured foot. Unable to do anything else, Li Binjiao gritted her teeth, grabbed another nail, and stabbed her sister's feet hard. There was another heartbreaking scream. This time Li Bingman didn't even have the strength to roll. Nails were inserted into the solace of both feet, which looked weird and terrifying. Chu Chen smiled with satisfaction, turned and left. Li Binjiao sent her sister to the hospital overnight and did a series of debridement, disinfection, and bandaging, which took a whole night. You can't rest now, Li Binjiao said to her sister seriously after the wound was bandaged. Tomorrow morning is Monday. You must rush to the training camp as soon as possible and beg for forgiveness from that little Xiaoling. If she doesn't forgive you, you won't be reinstated. Sister, I don't want to go. Li Bingman's injured foot was still hurting, and her eyes were filled with hatred. I'm so sorry for that little bitch. If I drop out, I'll drop out. I can go to other training camps and still be able to do it after enrolling in school. You can also become the chief freshman and make a glorious debut. Confused, Li Binjiao scolded her, if you do this, you will always bear the reputation of being fired by the emperor. Even if you debut in the future, people will say that you are not as good as the emperor's Xiaoling. This is not the most terrible thing. Yes, the most terrible thing is, what if Xiaoling thinks you are still angry? She is so petty and will continue to cause trouble for you in the future. Even if you have my support, the entire emperor is behind her. Company, who dares to offend the emperor? You don't want to be in this business anymore, do you? Li Bingman was speechless by her rebuttal. The next day, I reluctantly went to find Xiaoling. Now standing in front of Xiaoling, she was as obedient as a little sheep. Classmate Xiaoling, please forget the faults of villains and let me resume school. I am willing to follow you and serve you. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1070. Chapter 1070 Conquering Li Bingman. Xiaoling was a little surprised. It turned out that Li Bingman was not as arrogant as she thought. She couldn't help but said, "You are still fighting with me on this level of success." Li Bingman lowered her head slightly and endured the humiliation. "I'm sorry." Xiaoling frowned. If she just hated Li Bingman before, now she looks down on her. She thought she could walk away with her head held high when she was trampled under the feet of their group. But what about Li Bingman? As soon as he suffered a defeat, he was completely frightened. Is being able to go to school in the training camp really that important? She couldn't understand. Is it more important than your pride and self-esteem? Li Bingman's heart felt like needles pricking her heart. If she could, why would she be willing to bow her head? However, whether she can go to school here is really more important than her pride and self-esteem. It involves a lifetime of fame and fortune. How can it be destroyed just for a mere self-esteem? In the face of absolute strength, self-esteem is ridiculous and luxurious. Li Bingman gritted her teeth and her voice became more respectful. "The Emperor training camp is my dream, Miss Xiaoling. I am willing to put down my pride in front of my dream." "What does it have to do with me?" Xiaoling became impatient again. "This Li Bingman is really annoying. What does it mean to put down your self-esteem in front of your dreams? It's like she's standing in the way of her dream." Li Bingman heard the displeasure in her voice and was slightly shocked. "Miss Xiaoling, please show your respect. I am really willing to work hard for you." "I can't use it." Xiaoling was still unhappy. The most important thing she needed now was someone who could help her in front of her and behind her. Why should she endure the distasteful Li Bingman hanging in front of her every day? "What's more, how do you know that I can let you go back to school? The decision to expel you was made by the school, not me." Yes, it's all decided by the school." Li Bingman thought she was going to distance herself from the relationship, so she nodded like a peck of rice. "I know you have a kind heart, and you will definitely not make such a cruel decision." On the sidelines, some onlookers asked their companions in low voices and doubts, "What did Li Bingman say?" "He said it as if Xiaoling can decide whether to fire her." "Is Xiaoling's background so awesome?" Xiaoling heard this and was even more unhappy. She had been carefully concealing the secret of her identity, but she didn't want it to be revealed because of Li Bingman's incident. "I'm just an ordinary trainee, but I can't interfere with the school's decision," she said angrily. "If you ask, just ask the school." She emphasized the word "cannot interfere" very hard, which made Li Bingman tremble again. "How could I forget that when Chu Chen came last night, he also gave an instruction, Miss Xiaoling doesn't like others to know her identity. If you leak her identity, the threat behind is self-evident." Li Bingman quickly changed her explanation. Okay, Miss Xia, then I will go and ask the school." "You are so kind-hearted, can I tell the school that you have forgiven me? If I cannot get your forgiveness, the school will, in line with the principle of harmony and unity among classmates, my student status will not be reinstated." Xiaoling was impatient and waved her hand. "Whatever you want." Turned around and left. She really didn't want to see Li Bingman with a grey face and a scumbag on her feet. Now that people had come to beg her and pricked her own feet to apologize, the anger in her heart was gone. Have to go. To be honest, she didn't care whether Li Bingman was expelled from the school or not. What she cared about more was not to continue to entangle with Li Bingman here, which would be bad if her identity was exposed. But, her steps suddenly stopped. How could Li Bingman know that begging her would be useful? Hello, her name was Li Bingman. Several meters away, Li Bingman was already walking towards the principal's office. When he heard her call, he trotted over with a flattering smile on his face. "Miss Xia, what's wrong with you?" "You." Xiaoling frowned and looked at her. "Do you know who I am?" Li Bingman was smart and could tell the truth, so she answered carefully, "My sister once met you at the emperor's headquarters. She heard that I had offended you, so she scolded me severely and told me who you were." She only dared to tell Xiaoling this much, and she didn't dare to tell Chu Chen. Chu Chen had said that Xiaoling couldn't know that he went to find them. Li Binjiao, Xiaoling sneered, "You two sisters have the same virtue. Yes, yes, we will never dare to do it again." Xiaoling waved her hand boredly, "Go." Li Bingman then left as if she had been granted amnesty. With Xiaoling's understanding, the school had no reason to continue to embarrass Li Bingman and quickly completed the procedures for her to return to school. And Li Bingman kept her promise, and from then on she worked for Xiaoling and became a follower by her side. Many people secretly laughed at Li Bingman, pointing fingers at how many people were gloating over how she was once such a glorious top student and the sister of a diva. Li Bingman was ashamed, sad, and angry, but for the sake of her future, she could only stay in a low position, and she hated Xiaoling in her heart. Xiaoling doesn't like her. The only people who can get close to Xiaoling are Xiahua and a few other confidants who have no ill intentions from the beginning. They are the ones who carry bags, relieve boredom, and help with coats. And people like Li Bingman? I can only do some peripheral chores, serving meals in the canteen, occupying seats in class, and hailing cars when I go out. It would be very hard for a delicate girl to do these things. Not all people in the training camp admired Xiaoling. Many senior students felt that she was arrogant and domineering, more arrogant than the other chiefs combined. Some of the boys among them talked about Li Bingman's family background and beauty, and approached her intentionally or unintentionally, helping her bring food and occupy a seat. Li Bingman enjoyed this proximity very much. It could be said that this was the only bright spot in her humiliating and gloomy training camp career. On this day, she was waiting in line with Xiaoling's lunchbox. A senior boy walked up next to him, with a slender figure and wearing a well-fitting white shirt. He looked at her and smiled politely. "You are a first-year school girl, right? I saw you when I registered for school." "Why? What about people eating here? The queue is so long, I don't know how long it will take." Li Bingman lowered his head slightly, revealing a small section of his graceful neck. After a moment, he raised his head and smiled bitterly. "Yes, I am just one person helping our class chief to prepare food. I hope the team can hurry up. If I go back late, she will be angry." Her voice was soft, like a submissive little daughter-in-law. The boy's sense of justice came out instantly. "The team has already turned 2 corners, how can we hurry up? Your class chief is called Xiaoling, is he still being unreasonable?" Li Bingman still smiled bitterly. "Who calls me the chief?" End of this chapter.